And for our second presentation, I have the pleasure of inviting a personality who is the founder and managing director of Intelligent Solutions and Consultancy Private Limited, a company that provides training and consultancy in ICT, telecommunications, and ICT solutions. He received his BSc Engineering in Electronics and Telecommunications from the University of Moratuwa with honors in 1998. He received his MSc and PhD in Information Communication and Networks Engineering from the University of Electrocommunications in Tokyo, Japan. He was also a visiting lecturer at the same university from 2000 to 2005. After graduating his PhD in 2006, he joined Freescale Semiconductor Japan as a system solutions engineer and was involved in broadband, mobile, and NGN infrastructure design and development. The experience he gained in ICT telecommunications during the 10 years he spent in Tokyo was immense. Since his return to Sri Lanka in late 2009, he is a senior lecturer visiting at many national and private universities in Sri Lanka and few universities in the region. He's also a leading ICT trainer, both local and in the South Asia region. He has his own ICT courses conducted for ICT and non-ICT professionals. Without further ado, I have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Manoda Gamage to give his presentation. Everybody, a round of applause.
Thank you, Faisal, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, let me thank IESL, the committee, and the president for inviting me to address you all. And it's a great honor to be speaking to you this morning. But at the same time, I'm in trouble. Now, I was preparing these slides till 1:30 this morning. And during the minister's speech, he used half of that. And the first speaker used the other half. I'm left with the first slide and the last slide. It's a situation for me. But we are engineers. So let me do some innovation and do something different to keep it useful and interesting for you. To be honest, I was told that I'm going to talk about the future of ICT, and so I made it like ICT as a solution for better future. But for me, when anybody tells future ICT, it's 5G and IoT. I was never told that there's another speaker talking about 5G and IoT. So I will skip a lot of slides here because you already heard some of them. So let me begin with this. Evolution of the internet, because all these technologies that the first speaker mentioned, everything depends on how the internet evolved. If you look at the Web 1, 2, 3, every decade we've seen this change, like he said. The Web 1, initial web in 1990s, we were sitting in front of a computer downloading information that somebody has uploaded. So we wanted a bigger downlink and hardly used the uplink from our computer to the access. But in the Web 2, it was the social media that came into the picture, YouTube and various stuff, where we interact with the web. So the Web 2 is read-write web, in contrast to the first read-only web. Then today, so we needed both uplink and downlink, which is why the changes in mobile broadband to provide a higher bandwidth in the uplink as well. Now the internet got to the next step. It's a personalized web for us now. Probably the internet knows about you more than you. Every morning we wake up and you go to your Facebook account, it tells you 4 years back on this day, you were doing this. We don't remember until we see that on the web. So he remembers about us more than us. Dangerous, isn't it? Sometimes we travel and we wake up in a different country and suddenly it says, "Good morning, Manodar, welcome to Nepal." Wow. Only my wife knew that I was in Nepal, but Facebook knew that too. So it's more personalized. And the next will be about the Internet of Things that we are going to get. So we started this Internet as a tool, as a supporting tool, but not anymore. Internet has become part of our life. We use the smart device to wake up. Now the alarm clock, I don't know. I don't know whether we have a clock even at home. We use the phone for that. We wake up for that alarm. We pay bills using the internet. We hardly buy a newspaper. I don't remember when I last bought a newspaper. So it's a lifestyle. Things, the way we do things have changed drastically, and internet has done this for us. So the next big change will be Internet of Things. Together with Internet of Things, we will see mobile broadband like we heard, the 5G. Today we are in 4G. We will see the 5G soon, next year, following year. We will see AI. We will see machine learning, virtualization, cloud coming in, a lot of big data analytics. All this together, these technologies, we are into the fourth industrial revolution. If you look at the evolution of mobile communication in line with this, you can see we already saw the first generation, second generation, and third generation of the web, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, and next will be IoT. This is it's in fact influencing the mobile broadband evolution as well. In the past, we've been in 2G, 3G. That was the first generation. Then came the HSPA supporting a little bit of the second generation of web, improving the uplink. Now today we are in 4G, where we get both uplink and downlink enhancements. And soon we are going to the 5G, which is mainly focusing on IoT. Now, from 2G to 3G, 3G to 4G, it was all about better speeds, bigger bandwidths. But from 4G to 5G, it is not the case. It is not the only case, I would say. Before we go into that, now we have this, we call these things third platform technologies, where the mobility, the cloud, social media, analytics, AI, all these will be used together. We will see millions of apps, billions of people using internet, and trillions of things connected to the internet. So this is the environment or the context that we are into. You already saw this slide in the earlier page. As I said, from 3G to 4G, it was the enhancement in the bandwidth. So from 4G to 5G, this enhancement in the mobile broadband feature is just a small portion. But more than that, it is about the use cases in IoT, Internet of Things. You already saw this, massive machine type and ultra reliable. You already saw the same features, why we have two IoT. One needs low cost, low energy, very small amount of data. You don't need high bandwidth, but massive number of devices. The other one is very high reliable link you need to do a surgery-like thing, and very low latency with very high availability. So this is the context. Now we see this ICT or technology or digital disruption around us happening. I think the minister talked about this. So what do you mean by this disruption is that the technology affects the way we do things, the way we do business, the way we live at a very high speed, high pace, at a large scale. It disturbs the existing established models. It changes the way we create value. It changes the way we interact with the society. Good to see hundreds of people gathering into one hall. Otherwise, I was doing a lecture last time, a public lecture at IESL auditorium, and I was told that it was broadcasted over YouTube. So there, in the room, there were only 25 people, because people were listening to that through the YouTube. So the way we interact is different. We feel like we are meeting our friends every day because we see them on Facebook. But if you really look back and see, when did you last really visited their home or physically met them? Probably years back. So this is it. It changes the way we do business. Today, I live in this country, and it is in a sad thing to say in a way, I am talking in a national conference for the first time in 4 years. And I am a person who goes to the region a couple of times a month to do keynotes. So last month I was in Philippines, in Bangkok. Before that I was in Nepal, Dhaka. Before that I was in Pakistan, Iran. Before that I was in India. I mean, I can keep on going like that. So I'm a person like that, doing a keynote or some presentation in a national forum for the first time in 4 years. In a way happy, in a way sad. Tomorrow I'm going to Philippines again. On my way back, I'll be doing some guest lectures in Bangkok. So the way we do things, the way we learn is different. All the courses of the important universities are on the web for free. A lot of courses out there. So the way we think about this knowledge has to be changed as well. I don't think that if I'm recruiting somebody, would I ask, do you have your engineering degree? Do you have your MSc? Do you have your PhD? No, I would ask, what have you been doing? What do you know? What can you do? What value you can bring in? Probably at the end, the HR somebody would check his certificates. So we need to change the way of thinking. It's the knowledge that matters more than anything else. I think the minister mentioned that too. So we are in a situation where the IT technology or the digital disruption is happening now. It is not temporary thing. It is the new normal. So we are in it. It's never going to get changed. It's going to be worse. I don't call it it's getting worse. Actually, that is the opportunity as well. This disruption creates the opportunity for us, especially for the engineers. That's our opportunity. You see these examples, again, the minister cited them. The innovation that we've seen in the recent past. Uber, largest taxi service, doesn't own a single taxi. Airbnb, largest real estate organization, doesn't own a single house. This is the disruption was done, and innovation came in, and they have grabbed the opportunities. Plenty of such examples I'm pretty sure you all are aware of. And you have seen this life cycle as well. We used to see this Kodak few decades back. When we want to do a trip, first thing we do is go and buy a film roll. Then it came the digital camera, and today hardly we use a digital camera. We are not even bothered whether we carry a camera with us, because we always carry our smart device with us. Always the camera is with us. So that is the disruptive innovation. Without the innovation, none of these opportunities would be materialized and used by the people. If you don't be alert and if you don't innovate, what would happen is this. We don't see these tapes, cassette tapes, video recorders, and all this stuff. They are eliminated. So as engineers, knowledge is key. There's a lot of changes happening around us, and that is the digital disruption. We are talking about digitized economies. If we don't be alert and update our knowledge, we will be eliminated. There are plenty of opportunities out there. We need to use our knowledge and innovate to make the best out of it. We should not forget that everything that is possible today was once impossible. So let's look at certain things that are impossible today, try and achieve them using our knowledge, which will be possible in the future. I would rather want to be a part of the disruption than being on the other side where we get disturbed. So I would say, emphasize again, innovation would maximize the opportunities that arise from the disruption. Now, this is my last slide. So I'm going to spend rest of my time here. Now, if you look at this, in fact, the platform is set well for me. I was worried that I will not have enough time with this slide before I came here. Luckily, the first speaker helped me to rush through those slides and come to this slide and spend rest of my 15 minutes or whatever on this slide, because this is going to be how ICT is going to help us to this country, and how we as engineers going to use this technology for the betterment of our mankind, especially in this country. Now, we can solve many issues that we have today using ICT. You take education first, because that's the key, knowledge. Now, the education, I wish if the minister was here as well, but I hope this message would go to the ministries as well as to the government through the IESL. Now, the education needs a huge change. Our education is something that is exam-oriented. It kills the creativity of our future. We need this to be a knowledge-based education. Just imagine, I'm sure most of you have had kids. When they are small, at the age of 4, 5, 6, they are so curious to know things. They ask hundreds of questions. They go to school. After O-level, after A-level, they come out. They are not curious anymore. They are molded into a kind of a standard something. And all discipline and the humanity that we should have in them are gone. There's a rat race out there, and the worst thing is they don't have the knowledge either. So this education system, if we don't change this, ICT cannot do anything for us. So we need a huge change. Now, what is the change that we are talking of? We hear every day, Langama Pasala, Hondama Pasala. Now, if we want to do this, which means we are trying to give the same facility that the Royal College in Colombo has to all the 9,000 or 10,000 schools in the country. Now, how many years do you think that would take? I mean, I don't think we will get that even in 100 years. Do you think all schools in Sri Lanka would have the same facility like in the Royal College in next 5 years? But how can we do that? Using ICT. Now we have so many affiliated universities around the country which are affiliated to the universities in UK, in the US, in Australia, various parts of the world. They are affiliated, and the local university is running the course and some sort of affiliation to. But do we have any single school affiliated to the Royal College in Sri Lanka? So why can't we use this ICT for that? So ICT can make the Langama Pasala, Hondama Pasala. Just with the existing infrastructure, by giving internet and some knowledge, that can be done in 2 years if we have the right policy. We have the capability. Unfortunately, government policy is not matching with the need of the hour. Government is trying to give away tabs and do the smart class. Is that the need? I don't think so. Now we have an exam-oriented education here. Do you need a smart class for that? Now smart class is needed for the children to get together and curiously, creatively do things by themselves as much as possible. So if the children want to do things by themselves, we have to put them together in a place without the teachers, probably. During our time, our only source was the teacher. But today, it's very different. Our little kids at the age of 2 or 3, they use iPads, smart devices. They know how to use it. I can remember my little daughter, when she was 2, she used to tell me, when I was trying to connect to the internet, no, Tati, you got to wait until that light becomes green. She's referring to the Wi-Fi. So they know that at the age of 2. I used my first computer after doing A-level. So that's the change. Now, if we don't have a change in our education system, there's no use of giving a smart class. If we don't change from the exam-oriented education where you run after tuition classes and try to pass the exam. Now, why this is? Now, look at the grade 5 scholarship exam. What does it do to our kids? That's our future. Now, why do we have that? We can criticize it, but what's the solution? The solution is there in IT. Now, if we want to have a creative society using the technology, I would say we don't need to send the kids to school all 5 days. I would say 3 days is enough. Let them work from home 2 days in their own or as groups. So what you can do is, at Royal College, you can have 2 batches easily. 3 days, Monday to Wednesday, 1 batch, Thursday to Saturday, another batch. You increase the intake to make it double. I don't think we need to spend time in school from 7:30 to 1:30. Maybe 8 to 12 is enough. You can have another batch from 1 to 5. So you can make the intake of Royal College by using ICT into 4 times. Can't you eliminate the grade 5 scholarship exam? The whole purpose of that is to get a school. If you can make the Royal College same content and same things done at Polonnaru or something, or Piliyandala Central, do I have to send my child from Piliyandala to Colombo? I mean, my daughter today is studying in a Colombo school, leaving home at 6 in the morning, coming back at 3:30, just to be in school from 7:30 to 1:30. Now, what are we doing? Unless we make this change, technology cannot do anything for us. Take the government services. How much time do we spend with this? There are services that are already computerized. I'll take just one. I'm not, I can give hundreds of examples, but I'll just take one, something that I experienced recently. Maybe things have changed slightly, but I experienced this about 2-3 years back. Getting a passport. Things have improved drastically. When you want to get a passport, renew your passport, there are designated studios where you go. They take the picture and they send the picture using the technology to the immigration department. They give us a reference number. But still, you got to get your standard application and all the documents. Now I'm getting my third passport, but still the same birth certificate that I used 20 years back with the immigration office. Still I have to take it today. Same, my whatever the certificate I have to take there. Same ID, photocopy, I have to take it there. And I go there, what do? To pay 5,000 or 10,000 rupees. Now can't you make a payment remotely? So we have done all the difficult part, but still the whole country is coming to the immigration office just to hand over those hard copies of that, whatever the certificates, and to give the fingerprint and to pay. Now these things can't you do online using the technology? Now we have done 95% of this, but still not achieving the goal. What is the goal? Stop commuting. We haven't done that. We have spent all the money, used the technology, but still we are going there. Who is doing this? We, engineers. So we need to, what I'm trying to say here is when you are doing government services or whatever, when you are automating, when you put them with ICT, you have to do a process engineering. You have to revisit the processes. If not, you make things inefficient. One best example I will give you from the finance sector. Now most of the private banks also, few years back, when they started the internet banking, I don't know, things might have changed today. This is something again that I experienced. Now if you go to a bank, you apply for a bank card, ATM card, you get it over the counter and use it in 3 minutes. You go and open a new, internet banking, still you got to go to the bank branch and fill a form, and I was told you will get your password by post, which will take few weeks. Now, internet and IT is to expedite things where I have to wait for 3 weeks to use internet banking, whereas I can get the ATM card in 2 minutes. If you lose your password, for example, you can't online. Maybe now it's possible. I'm referring again a few years back. You again have to go to the branch, fill a form. I live in Piliyandala. I go to the branch all the time. Only 2 parking lots are there, all filled, so I leave and go. So it took about 3 months for me to go to the branch to tell that I lost my password, and another 2 months for them to send a new password by post. So this is what happens if you use the technology in the wrong way. Same with agriculture, health sector. Transport is an area where we can do immense things. I personally, now I'm an independent consultant, I hardly want to come to Colombo. I do a lot of things online. I come to Colombo maybe 2 or 3 days maximum. Maximum 2 days, I'll try to stop at 2. Other days, I'll stay home and work from home. Now, to do that, you have to discipline yourself. If we ask the government servants to, okay, you don't have to come here, you work from home. I mean, when you don't even work in the office, how come you expect them to work from home? So that's where the education should bring all that culture of working and the responsibility, discipline. So that's what I said. If you don't have these things, technology can do only little for you. Smart cities, smart village, whatever you call it. I have seen a nice project these days, Colombo Smart City project by the Colombo Municipal Council. I don't know how many of you know that. There's a 20-year contract awarded after a tender to it's a public-private partnership. Fortunately or unfortunately, I happen to be one of the consultants there as well. So we have the opportunity of doing something different now. We are trying our best. Now, in order to do this, you should have all your national policies, guidelines aligned with these digitized economies and so on. We have to always have the policies to encourage the innovation and the entrepreneurship. We need to make a huge change as engineers. So let's do this. Knowledge, skill, and the attitude are the vital things if we need to make any change for this country. Technology definitely can do a lot of changes. So for me, education is not learning facts, but it's rather training your mind to think differently. So I hope, even though my slides were made redundant by the two speakers before me, I still could manage to do my 30 minutes. So thank you very much for your time. Once again, thank you very much for inviting me so we can have some questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mananda. I think it was more of a very inspirational speech rather than just knowledge dissemination. And he said it very clearly that we are very good in taking technology, catching up with that, but we keep the last 5%, that is the worst 5% still intact in the system, so which will ruin the whole thing. So thank you very much, Mananda, for that. And now we are changing gears from ICT, connectivity, electronics to energy sector. And we have the veteran energy expert, Dr. Tilak Siyamalapitiya. Can we have his
Yeah,
introduction?
he's given me a very short profile because he wants it to be very short. He graduated from the University of Moratuwa and earned his PhD from the Cambridge University in 1988. And after 15 years of work in electricity utilities in Sri Lanka and overseas, he presently works as an energy consultant. He's also the editor of Slema Journal and teaches energy systems and energy efficiency to engineering students. So ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure in inviting Dr. Tilak Siyamalapitiya for his presentation.
Thank you very much, the President and the Council. I am honored to be presenting at the National Engineering Conference. And I also congratulate the Council for the decision to take it out of Colombo. I am, for one, a person who is dead against the Colombo-centric thinking that still drives in the minds of many of our engineering community as well. Let me get on to the subject. The subject assigned to me is a contribution of the energy sector to the economy, past, present, and the future. From IT, I'm going to pull you down right to the ground, talking about energy. What you see there is the way of cooking still used by 50% of our people. And the domestic fireplace was also engineered, and the energy efficiency of the traditional hearth was raised from 5% to 12% with this innovative design. And that was done by the engineers in the 1980s. But still, improvements are possible to increase the efficiency of this device up to 25%. But the research that went into it is now somewhat stalled, and the market is not moving for more efficient devices. But moving further, what I observe is that Sri Lanka has successfully met the aspirations of the people by way of ensuring access to modern energy sources well ahead of our neighboring countries. So all our engineers who worked very hard to achieve this objective should be congratulated that our people have access to clean energy and access to modern energy compared with our neighbors and similar economies. Looking at the statistics, Sri Lanka is, in my view, not an energy inefficient country. So this is a group of countries that have similar per capita GDP. You will see that Sri Lanka is on the top left, which means it uses less energy and produces more. For every kilogram of oil equivalent, we produce $8 worth of economic output, which is good, not the best, but certainly good compared with other similar countries. So for one, I would always like to explain a few good things about Sri Lanka, and then we will get on to the more difficult and things that are yet to be achieved. Among our immediate neighbors too, Sri Lanka, in the energy aspect, has a reasonably good standing. However, Sri Lanka's energy use is growing very fast. Besides occasional drops, as you see in these statistics, which are available in your handout, the energy consumption is growing. The same information in a bar chart, where we see structural change. The green bar is somewhat stagnant, as you see, which is the biomass, which still supplies about 40% of our energy requirements, including the energy requirements of some modern industries. And the red bar is oil, which is all imported. Ash is coal. And then the major hydros, certainly renewable, and the new renewable sources of energy, which is solar, wind, and smaller biomass for commercial applications. There were many early initiatives to serve commercial energy to our population. To do justice to the topic, let me recap a few things that have gone on. Petroleum industry evolved in Sri Lanka over 130 years. At the end of the 19th century, the same company still exists, but of course with a different focus. Kerosene apparently was introduced to the country. Then, of course, other company came in, and currently 2 players supply petroleum products to the country. Electricity industry evolved over 120 years, and merely 15 years after the first public electricity supply system in the world, that was in UK, Sri Lanka had electricity. So looking at a long history, perhaps a 15-year delay seems to be all right. But in 2016, the government declared that all households have now been supplied with electricity. Maybe there are a few that are yet to be connected, but in principle, everybody has access to electricity. Not only access, but they have an active electricity account. Gas supply industry also evolved over 150 years. Streets of Colombo city were lit up with gas lamps as early as 1872, and that was coal gas, and the Colombo Gas and Water Company provided the service. And right now, about 30% of households now use LPG, and only LPG for cooking, in addition to the industries that are using liquid petroleum gas. Of course, the initiatives to serve commercial energy to the population and to economically active sectors, industry and commerce, saw many changes in the institutional structure. It started off with the private sector in 1880 and the government intervention starting from 1928, nationalization of the petroleum industry in 1961, restructuring, and the minister spoke of innovative institutionalization and corporatization of certain activities of the electricity industry, transformers, and the formation of LECO. So we who did some reforms in 1980 now are scared to even do a little bit of reforms in bringing in private sector thinking to traditional businesses. Private power generation was allowed from 1996, and petroleum industry had some structural changes in 2002. To quickly summarize perhaps certain questions in your mind, where does biogas stand? There are operational biogas facilities, but yet a lot more has to be done to improve their performance and popularity. There are problems associated with biomass supply chain, which is constraining the development of more biomass used for power generation. Firewood is integrated with tea and coconut plantations have been tested, but not much popular. And certain milestones of the electricity industry, and we have completed the development of the so-called large hydroelectric power development of the major river basins. On the left-hand side, you see the thriving small hydro business, an example of a small hydro business that is thriving with over more than 200 sites developed for small hydro development. And in the middle, we see an example of perhaps something we should not be building, an oil-burning small power plant. We have several of these, we had several of these because of the problems of not being able to do the proper thing to produce our electricity. On the right-hand side, again an example of the thriving business of the private sector to produce wind-based electricity and sell to the grid, which at one time was paid the world's highest price. Now these problems are being resolved gradually with regard to price. Further milestones on the end-use side, efficient lighting. In my view, we have achieved the objectives to a large extent, but now obscured by the proliferation of substandard LEDs and the misconceptions related to LEDs, and of course the need for other appliances to be brought in to the labeling regulation with regard to safety and energy efficiency. So on the left-hand side, you will see what has been achieved, and I leave the right-hand side box for what we have not been able to do in bringing in energy efficiency regulations for other appliances that are used in large numbers. But that is not to say that Sri Lanka is not an energy efficient country. In my view, Sri Lanka, I would classify as an energy efficient country. We move forward with a little bit of technical insight, particularly for the benefit of our non-electrical engineering members. This I'm sure you have seen somewhere. What I wanted to highlight is that in this load profile of the electricity network, as you see, the profile is changing. And if I take you to your university days, I have normalized the curve with 100% being shown for the maximum figure. And each curve is now normalized on its own maximum value. So as you see, the curve is changing in my view for better. It's a result of a mix of engineering through which the customers have been informed that electricity is more expensive in the evening. And also the fact that Sri Lanka has now almost completed the electrification of households, which means the nighttime demand is not increasing rapidly, whereas the daytime electricity consumption is improving, as you see, as we go through the years, which is a good indication in a way. But what is bad is that in the early morning hours, the curves are still together. So which means we are not increasing the off-peak consumption. Because the manufacturing industry is not growing, particularly the heavy manufacturing industry is not growing. They are the people who presently use electricity in these early morning off-peak hours. So that's not a good sign because the sectors of the economy that provide a lot of value addition and employment, as the electricity meter says, whatever the government says, the electricity meter is a better indicator. Those sectors are not growing. But of course, with new technology coming in, with battery technology coming in, perhaps I will say a different thing in 5 years' time, saying that we don't need to worry about this for now because the new technology is going to look after that. But we'll have to wait for that for a while. Of course, the country has fully mapped the hydro, wind, solar, and biomass resources. Wave and geothermal energy sources are yet to be fully understood and mapped. So I've given you some examples of the resource maps just for your information, and these are available in the public domain. And the hydroelectric potential of the country, as well as the solar potential of the country, which is now drawing a lot of interest as to what we could do, how far we can go. I will get into that in a moment. And the country has several good world-class measuring stations for these renewable sources of energy. One is in Kilinochchi for solar measurement, and another one in Hambantota measuring most of the parameters that are required for a high-level analysis of the design of solar photovoltaic and other solar-based energy harnessing systems. The wind regime in the country is reasonably well understood, and of course the dark brown areas have the best wind potential, and those dark brown areas are difficult to reach. So therefore there are certain limitations, but as you know, on the western coast, particularly on the northwestern coast, extending from Putlam to Punareen, a lot of developments are already happening or being planned for wind resource development. Petroleum demand is rising, and there is a significant supply imbalance. So this is one of the issues that we need to address. So these are some of the negative things in the energy sector that engineering can perhaps look for solutions, and the market imbalance for different petroleum products is acute. So as the next diagram says, we have less than 50% of the supply coming from our own refinery, and about 50% of the total petroleum products is diesel, which is unusual for a country, have more than 50% of all petroleum products being diesel. So these issues will have to be resolved by a lot of other actions on the demand side. Safety and safe supply and use of energy also has attracted some attention. Sri Lanka is a country that still loses more than 100 lives owing to electrocutions. We engineers have to be ashamed that more than 100 people die quite unnecessarily because of unsafe use of electricity. Of course, in this one, IESL has taken some initiatives to bring in new safety measures, to encourage the regulators to bring in safety measures in certain aspects of unsafe use of electricity. So I'm sure the members are aware that Sri Lanka is moving to a single standard of socket and plug from January, which will be mandatory for all users, suppliers, marketeers to use one single standard, and IESL initiated this work. Quite rightly, of course, safe use of electricity coming soon is also the licensing of electricians. As you know, in our country, anybody can call yourselves an electrician. You can call yourselves an electrician, and you can undertake work, and provide services to your client. So this is not going to be so hopefully starting from next year. Once again, an initiative of IESL to bring in the electricians, the trade of electricians into a licensing regime. Of course, safe use of energy, other forms of energy, a lot more needs to be done to educate the public about safe use of energy. A brief word about energy sector emissions before we look into the future. Energy sector emissions, we have to be cautious. As you see in this table, I will not go into a lot of detail. The highest net emissions come from transportation, and the next highest emissions come from power generation. So we need to do things to manage these emissions to meet our international obligations. I've given some examples as to how much of greenhouse gas emissions can we save, just to give you some idea and perhaps to get you thinking of what we can do. As you see, if we can build a 10 megawatt wind power plant, we can save 25,000 tons of GHG, whereas the total national emission as of 2015 was 12.5 million. And a 10 megawatt power plant, if it is solar, it takes only 10 hectares. A 100% renewable energy scenario, this of course has been discussed. Perhaps we are looking at a plan to move to 100%. There are technical constraints, technical limitations. We have to recognize those as well. If we can move to a 100% renewable energy scenario for the power sector, we can save 3.7% million tons of greenhouse gas emissions. Improve end-use energy efficiency by 1%. Everybody saves 1% through energy efficiency, 1.2 million tons. And something that most of us are not doing, travel to work by bus instead of by car. For one person, for a 20-kilometer round trip, we can save 0.2 tons of GHG per year, and multiply that by a million, or probably about 5 million people who actually travel these kind of distances to work. You can imagine the amount of impact that we could do through the use of energy by not using energy and using energy more efficiently. There are targets set by Sri Lanka with regard to its efficiency in various aspects. Sri Lanka is one of the countries that have shown or reported a very low network loss on the electricity industry. And Sri Lanka met the target of 10% from new renewable energy sources that we ourselves set for 2015. The target was met, and there are new targets that are being discussed for 2030 and for 2050 as well. So, looking at the past and the present. So where do we go from here? What would be transport like by 2050? Of course, the previous presenter's question as to whether transport is required. Obviously, the transport requirements are reducing owing to introduction of technology, but on the road you do not see it. Number of vehicles and the number of people moving is increasing. What would be the electricity industry like in 2050? And where should the engineer's attention be to engineer the energy system and all its associated end users in the correct direction so that we use the technology and the latest technology and the proven technology so that we give a better quality of life to our people as well as produce more at a lower consumption of energy, which will bring our emissions down to help us to meet our international commitments. In my view, transportation will be increasingly electric to make them energy efficient and ready for renewable energy. As we know, electric cars are already on the road, electric buses are planned, and electric train services are already at an advanced stage of design. by way of, in my knowledge, 4 projects: Colombo Suburban Railway Project, Light Rail Transit Project, and the Kandy Suburban Railway Feasibility Study, which is ongoing, and the Sri Lanka Railway Master Plan. So, at last, in my view, after perhaps several decades, a major, in my view, revolution is happening in making some investments on public transport, and that public transport will use electricity to enable it to be ready for renewable energy in the future. Because if I ask you the question as to how would you have come if you still lived in year 2050 to this annual engineering conference, because by then there will be no fossil fuels available. All right, so you have to tell me that you would actually either not come here, you participate from home, but most likely there will be a physical contact, and most likely you will come in an electric vehicle. So therefore, and that electric vehicle would have to use the remaining amount of renewable energy we have, and of course, possibly nuclear energy. Of course, that's a different topic. Perhaps we can have a separate seminar on that. Efficiently, not perhaps using private transport, but using public transport. So once again, this is one of the things that IESL has been promoting, and IESL was in the forefront of perhaps in policy advocacy to the government to think hard and move ahead with using electricity for transport, particularly for railways. So this is a train that is actually, it's empty because the previous train has just left 2 minutes ago. And you can imagine that this is most likely to be either the Wayangoda station, the modern Wayangoda station, and it will leave in 2 minutes. And you will see the train driver in uniform on the platform and is waiting for the passengers. Moving on, there are more initiatives that would serve the economic development in the near future. Of course, renewable energy projects and the use of gas for power generation and industrial heating, and an efficient refinery, energy efficiency in industries and buildings, and transport sector initiatives including electrification. Before I conclude, I would perhaps, since I have an interdisciplinary audience, perhaps convey some key messages to the engineering community of all disciplines to ensure that tomorrow's engineers and energy engineering would support and not retard the economy. My first message is that biomass for energy is yet to reach its full potential. We still get 45% of our energy from biomass, but we need to consider the fact that Sri Lanka is a country with a high population density. 300 people per square kilometer is a high population density. And we are eager to retain the forest cover. People want to live in single housing units. Most of us do not want to live in multi-story apartments, but some people do. Hence, land is scarce, although much of it is presumed to be available for biomass farming. So we need to think of corporatization of plantations of biomass if we are to move ahead in using biomass as a source of energy for more sectors of the economy. My second message is the needs of the petroleum sector. We are in need of major decisions and large investments. In spite of the fact that, of course, we hear that fossil fuels will be no more by 2050, perhaps at least we have to go on till 2050. The refinery project has been hanging around for over 20 years in my recollection. Gas exploration and commercialization needs decisions and speedy actions. Otherwise, one arm of the government says gas will be available, the other arm says where is the gas and let us use diesel. And this game has been going on at least for 20 years. Gas import projects, which are also feasible, are not getting anywhere. What we are looking at is a world-class refinery to replace our aging 50-year-old refinery, and a liquefied natural gas import terminal, which Sri Lanka is struggling to make a reality when others in the region do it in 3 years. My third message is that Sri Lanka cannot go into the future with dwindling public transport run on diesel. We discussed it before, that the future of transport will be electric and public, not diesel and private. And the transition has to be gradual and not overnight. Of course, although I'm saying these things, we have to manage this transition by making railways provide the lowest economic cost and energy efficiency, especially for daily commuters, and the transport sector efficiency needs a major turnaround. The fourth message is that Sri Lanka needs to understand the renewable energy and distributed generation, that they have significant advantages as well as limitations. So we engineers should be able to clearly identify the capabilities and limitations of renewable energy. Intermittency and seasonality issues of renewable energy are still not fully resolved even at research levels, but they are being resolved. A live electric power system cannot be run on experiments because the customers of today are asking for a reliable supply and an increasingly reliable supply. So therefore, the use of technology, the use of renewables would have to match the requirements of a reliable electricity supply system. So therefore, the technology is available. We need to gradually build it into our system, but not overnight. Message number 5, as in any business, energy too is a business and customer rights have to be honored. We still not been able to make the utilities to be fully transparent and respond to regulatory initiatives. Utilities need to be heard, compensated for costs to meet social objectives, and correct and incorrect policy decisions. Because as you know, most of our utilities are directly or indirectly government owned, and the governments always attempt to implement the government policies, some are social policies, through the utilities. Both regulators and utilities have to fulfill their mandates and obligations. So as we go into the future, we need to meet all these objectives, and my last 5 messages are messages for our interdisciplinary audience of engineers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tilak Siembelapitiya, for that very informative, futuristic, in a way, for us in Sri Lankan context, how things are moving on the ground and what is the likelihood scenario for the next 5-10 years. I think everyone would like to hear more on this in the panel discussion. I think we are on time. So now we can open this session for the panel discussion. So may I now invite our 3 speakers today, this session, Professor Arumugam Nalanathan, Dr. Manodha Gamage and Dr. Tilak Siembelapitiya to take their seats on stage.
We also need cordless mics to go around if there are any questions.
Yeah, I think mics are already there. I saw 1 or 2 mics being do we have mics in the audience, FM mics? Yes, ask it. Can we have the mics, few FM mics to the audience, please? I would like to open this panel discussion with some opening remarks from each of the panelists today. We have heard to them, but if you can take 1 minute each to summarize all these things and put it to the context, how those technologies, or say the status quo of this country, or maybe in the region, particularly for Professor Arumugam Nalanathan, who is coming from abroad, what do you think that would happen in the next 5-10 years in this region in terms of the technologies you presented today? So let me start off with Dr. Tilak Simbalak.
Okay, quickly, if we consider the region to be South Asia, the region is still trying to consolidate their energy supplies and bring the high quality commercial energy to their population. So Sri Lanka is significantly ahead of our South Asian neighbors, but definitely lagging behind our Southeast Asian neighbors who have done a lot more in bringing in the quality of service after they have achieved universal access. In the very long term, I believe the electricity industry will also have a Uber-like arrangement, with every customer being a producer. Already a new term has been coined. Electricity consumers are no longer consumers, they are prosumers. Producer, consumer, prosumer. That's a new word, not yet in the dictionary, but perhaps in a few years it will come into the dictionary. So that if you have surplus energy stored in your batteries at home, you can offer it on the internet to a prospective customer. That will be the future, but don't be in a hurry to get there. We are not there yet.
Okay, I think when it comes to IT and telecommunication or technology, 5G and IoT is going to be the future for us as well. So I'm in a way very happy the way the telecommunication industry in Sri Lanka has evolved. In the region, we can say that we are very much in advance with the technology. We got 3G very early, we got HSPA very early, we got 4G very early. We will have 5G also soon. We already have like NB-IoT by several operators, and we already have started the Colombo Smart City project, which is going to use NB-IoT as well. So under that project, we will have smart lighting within the next 3 to 5 years. The complete lighting of all the municipal council area would be converted into LED and smart controlling. Together with that, we will have a lot of environmental sensors coming up with the smart city. Then the parking, which smart parking like technologies, where, I mean, like Professor said in his speech, we make circles in Colombo looking for parking. That creates more traffic, and of course it's energy inefficient there. So all this can be solved by having a smart parking lot where the sensor is there and you know exactly. And there is an app, and also all these technologies we will be using. But one thing, when I said that our technology or telecommunication technology advancement was done by the operators, I would say, and we have to give the credit to them. But when it comes to 5G, it's not just advancing the broadband, it is more about use cases of Internet of Things, where regulator, or rather the operator, cannot do it by themselves. It is the government who plays the role as a regulator, should play a role, a major role as a user as well. Because for IoT and for this, the biggest user will be the government institutions, ministries, and so on. So that should happen, otherwise we'll be circling in the same place. It should be, the demand should be created and ignited. So private-public partnership, this Colombo Municipal Council project is a good start for that, I'd say. Thank you.
Okay, I agree with Dr. Gamage. So actually, Sri Lanka is ahead in ICT compared to other South Asian countries. So I am sure that in next 5 to 10 years, so the ICT sector will improve. But however, mostly I believe in the urban areas. So for example, if you take Sri Lanka, so in the rural areas, agriculture, I think those kind of rural areas, ICT involvement, it will take some time. But if you take China, so there are so many IoT industries for agriculture. So livestock monitoring and so many things. But in my observation, so the ICT technology, IoT and everything, the growth will be mostly in the urban areas.
Okay, now we can take questions from the audience, please.
My question is about transport sector. I don't know who is going to answer that. We know now today technology is available even with us. With the mobile app, you can see where the taxis are available. And you can see how they move also on the road. Why can't you do that? That cannot be very costly, because otherwise we can't be surviving now with that kind of technology. Now, why can't we use the same thing for buses, public transport buses? And then the customer can see it where the next bus is, and regulator can see whether the buses are really moving or stopping at some place and waiting for passengers, which is all those things. It can be done at a very low cost. Why can't they do that?
I think the best panelist to answer that question probably.
Yeah,
Manoj,
actually,
yeah.
it can be done, and it has been, I mean, there are several people who have been doing this, but as pilot projects in Sri Lanka. But the thing is that I don't have the numbers for this, but I presume the number of buses are not enough, even though we see where they are. Right, and there are a few other things to this. This is what I said. Until we change our attitude and the culture, we can't change. Now, say for example, all the top executives of the private sector and the public sector are getting official vehicle and free fuel. In that context, how can you encourage them to go in public? I mean, even if it is available. Now, I lived in Japan for 10 years. I never owned a car. You can imagine, right? I mean, I never owned a car in Japan, where the cars are sent to the rest of the world. We don't own a car when you live there. Soon as I come here, I need a car. So I brought a car from there. So that's the culture. So we need to change all that as well. So I would say, if you really, I mean, the way forward, like the professor said, definitely public transportation is the way, and in that also trains is the best way. We have to get used to it. I'm quite used to it. I hate driving. I love to take the train and go. But we need to train ourselves for that. Now for that, the rest of the procedures and the environment, the culture has to be changed as well. Now which should change first is the question.
I think the question is more on the technical side. Why is it not possible to implement pretty much the same thing that the PickMe and Uber is doing on public transportation? I think it's just a matter of a decision, no? Because implementation is absolutely no issue.
But the thing is, even if you do that, do we have that PickMe thing is still, again, we are using, one person is using that car. Now, bus to sustain, I mean, you can know where the bus is and you can come out to the road for that. But the thing is that, can you depend on that bus? That's the problem for us. Can you completely eliminate using your private car? Now, for that to happen, we should have regular enough buses, comfortable enough for us to use.
Yeah, not only the user, even the regulator can use this. Because what is happening is now, the buses are, not, we know about how the buses run. They speed up sometimes, they stop somewhere and wait for passengers and all that. All that can be eliminated with this kind of thing.
Yeah, technologically, yes, it's possible, but whether, I mean, there's a cost in that. It's a matter of, do you want to do that to add 2 more buses to the fleet?
I would like to add to his comment. So, for example, if you take Singapore or UK, so these facilities are there at the bus stop. So, when will be the next bus in 2 minutes or 3 minutes, everything's there. But in UK and Singapore, the public transport is centralized, only one body controls. But here, if they want to implement the CTB and private minibuses, then they overtake running here and there. So the implementation, whether we are going to implement to the CTB or private buses, is it's a very complicated, joining private and buses and the public sector. But if you take Singapore and London, only centralized, only one body runs the bus, so then they can implement it. So here to implement to private minibuses or public transport, so that's a complicated issue.
All right. Any more questions from the audience, please?
Yeah, Panel Chairman, I would like to make a correction that the National Transport Commission actually monitors all the interprovincial buses in real time using the same technology used by Pick Me and Uber, technology-wise. So it is happening because, as the professor said, it is administered by a single authority, the National Transport Commission, the interprovincial. But within the province, as he pointed out, there is no such arrangement. They don't even have a common timetable.
There's a question from the middle area, please.
Today, with the session, those speakers, I think, did a good presentation, and there are things to think different. And my question is, in this country, still IoT and big data, that is very new to these people in this country, professionals especially. I know that the future is mostly not for going for ownership, but for sharing, collaboration, and those things are the matters in the future. So in that case, always, and other terms like, as Dr. Simbalapati said, prosimos, because I heard about a few days back was that word, because everybody becomes a producer or the manufacturer or maker like that. So we, as Dr. Gamage said, because we want to change our attitude. So what we can do to make that change?
That is a very complicated question, but I think panelists might have they can shed some light on that, please.
I would say the engineers have to lead the change. Engineers have to lead the change because we tend to blame politicians and others, but actually politicians are not asking not to do any of these things, right? So it is we engineers who will have to first understand, if required, go back to school, and retrain ourselves and lead this change.
I would personally think that it's very tough for the adults to change. I'm not saying impossible. So we got to start this in schools. So that's where the education has to change. At least in another 10, 20 years' time, our young people would make the change to the society.
So I think this is, a lot of people have more or less the same view on that question. Where do we start this change? And as Dr. Mando said, if we want to change this from schools, we have to wait decades to see some output. So, but is there any way to get some quick changes, maybe a delta change that will change our heading to a proper direction? Any specific specific guidelines or any insight into maybe energy sector or IT sector where can we start to change the things in the short term?
Okay, I think if you expect any change in the society, it has to come within you. So, I am a changed and different person. The people who are around me know it. So, we think differently. We try to influence on others in that different way. But that's where we need to lead a life by example so that our kids would see what we do. So I personally, as a kid, I never threw my bus ticket on the road. I mean, in Sri Lanka, let's assume that 30 years back, we were not even talking about a dustbin or whatever, but I never threw the ticket. I put it in my pocket and took it home. My parents were laughing at me. I mean, there are a lot of garbage. Why you are bringing this home? I don't know why, but I did it. So when I go with my kids, I always tell them, don't do that, don't do this. Cross the road at the right place. I never park my car in wherever there is space if not the right place to park. So we have to practice that. Maybe there are hundreds of cars parked there illegally. Me not parking it there may not make an impact to the road, but at least I don't do that. And my kids would see this, and they will not do it in the future. That's the expectation. So we have to change ourselves. I never push my children to go and study and do the exam or whatever. I am a telecommunication engineer with a PhD. My daughter gets 35 marks for IT. My wife is doing her PhD in IT as well. We are least bothered about her marks. Her first language, she was born overseas, so her first language was like English. She hardly scored over 40 for English until she was in grade 5 or something. There's nothing wrong with her because she could converse with a foreigner, a native English speaker, or any country person. She would understand the BBC, CNN news at the age of 3 or 4, but she could not score more than 40 from her English paper. Now, should she change her way or should the exam be changed? So if we can be least bothered, if we are expecting a change, if we can change ourselves, I think that's where we can begin the change.
All right.
May I add something? So you wanted ideas? Most of the audience are working in the utility industry. It could be water, electricity, or other public services. I believe more than 50% of our audience, and I'm happy that most of them are young, not very old like us. Can we set a target that over the next 3 years, no customer would have to visit you to get something done? Could be a water connection, change of account, could be a new electricity connection, closing of an account, getting approval for whatever clearance from a highway authority, municipal or otherwise. Can we set a target that gradually over the next 3 years, customers will use IT, already established systems, nothing fantastic, that no customer will have to visit your office and wait until you come. And in case you have gone for an IESL meeting, then he has to come back tomorrow to meet you. Even today, there will be customers waiting in your offices, hoping that you will return to office after this.
I think that is quite proactive way of getting things going, I think. Anybody who is in this audience who is aligned with that one, ready to take the challenge, please. Come on. You have 3 years to make that change. You don't want people to come and wait till you come to your seat or to get service is a challenge, quite achievable, I think, with the ICT technology we have today. So, right, we have something to take away today. At least we'll try and see. I think this is happening more or less in various places, in universities, in various sectors, private and public. But can we make it going beyond the threshold so that we can actually see some transformational change in the short run? So I think we are getting close to the end of the session, and now it's 1:30. Okay, we have 1 or 2 minutes for one last question, please.
One quick session, yes.
Right, very quick one for Arjuna Manamperif to Dr. Simbalapitiya. Dr. Simbalapitiya, you put out a graph where you indicated the per capita GDP of Sri Lanka, and what was on the horizontal axis? You said we are using energy. Right? Here's the question. That's a very impressive graph, but what's underneath is are we producing GDP, or that's because our debts we bring into the country also goes into the GDP, if I know my mathematics right?
Well, GDP calculation is standardized, so it's international standard method of calculation. So whatever that is included in GDP is included there.
Exactly. So if we really become a value-adding nation rather than bringing the debt and putting into services, etc., will our situation change in the future? In a hypothetical case, if you have a lot of industries, etc., will that horizontal line change?
You will go to a higher point in the horizontal axis. You will use more energy, but we should have the corresponding higher value addition as well.
Yeah.
So if at all, we should be moving on the same line, but preferably not getting too close to the inefficient economies who are on the right-hand side.
All right, now let me conclude this session this morning. So please put your hands together for the panel.
Well, that proved to be a very productive first session. Gentlemen, please stay where you are, because we certainly appreciate all that you've done this morning. Can I please invite the president of ISL, Professor, to present tokens of appreciation to the chair, session chair, Professor Ruhan Munasinghe. Going back to school, huh? Right, let's also recognize Engineer Professor Arumugam Nalanathan for his presentation this morning. Also, Engineer Dr. Manoda Gamage. And certainly not forgetting Engineer Dr. Tilak Siambalapitiya. Thank you very much. Well, we're now going to be taking a break for lunch. We have 30 minutes, presumably, because our next session starts at 2 o'clock, hopefully. So we'd like all of you to have your lunch and get back at 2 o'clock. Thank you.